Hello, welcome back. In this module, we're going to learn everything about how we can manage our users. And we're going to take the Firebase authentication user object and we're going to create our own. But why would you want to do that? Well, for starters, this object, you can change it. You cannot add more items to it and you don't really have control. You can change the email and phone number, photo URL, and etc. But you won't be able to add any additional information to this user. And also, if you ever want to pack up and go to another provider, you won't be able to export the users from this list. You'd need to add it to our Firebase, your Firestore, and then you can export that data. So let's start this module by modeling our own user. I'll open up my VS Code. And here we have our components and our service folder. I'm going to create another one called interfaces. You can name however you like it. So as we saw before, interfaces in TypeScript is a way that you can constrain an object. So that will give you warnings if you try to set any properties that is not available to that object. And also, we'll give you some nice code completion. So let's create a file for our user. I'm going to call it user.ts. And here we're going to export an interface, just a basic interface. So export interface user. And here I'm going to use a few of the items that is in the Firebase, like email, display name, photo URL. And also the UID, which is very important for us. So inside here, these are the ones I grabbed from the authentication. You can add more, like the phone number, email is verified. Create a data is a good, like a member since option. Anyways, and we're also gonna add a few more things in here on our own. I want a bio, website, and a Twitter and GitHub handle. I'm just gonna add these ones. You can add as many as you want. And we're also gonna have a role, and the role is gonna be a string, an array of strings. Okay, next we just need to go to our service, and here the user we're getting is a Firebase user. Now we're gonna change for our own user because this is restrained. So I'm gonna import this user of ours. If you start typing, it would give you the option to import from, see the user interface. The one was from Firebase. There you go, our user. And now it's complaining that it is missing a few items and we have some that is not available. So we just need to change this one. Instead of returning the Firebase user with the auth state, we're gonna use the auth state observable, and we're gonna get the user Firebase user UID, which will then pull out the information from Firestore about our user. So in Firestore, we need to create some collections, and ours will be user and then user ID. So this user ID we're gonna get from the auth state, and we're gonna pull out this document from Firebase after that. So let's start by piping this observable. Now inside we're gonna use a switch map operator from RxJS, and what it does is gonna take this observable and we're gonna grab some information from it, and you're gonna return another observable. So here we're gonna take the user, that is the Firebase user, and then we're gonna return something else. If there is a user authenticated, we return our user. And if there is the user is not authenticated, we're gonna return a new value, but an observable. And for that, we're gonna use the auth. The auth from RxJS, it creates an observable of whatever you want in here. So we're gonna create an observable of new, so we can read from here after when you subscribe to the user. Now, to get our user, now that you have the user UI access to the user UID, we're gonna read the data from Firestore, and for that we're gonna also use the RxFire library. So let's go ahead and start using the RxFire Firestore. Back in our code, I'm gonna import the RxFire Firestore, and here I'm going to use a function called docData. We have the docData and from reference. I'm gonna use the data, and that one is gonna return the full object for us. So here we're gonna return the docData. It takes a Firestore document reference, so we need to call Firestore. And this Firestore, we need to pull it from our Firebase in here, which already initialized from our app. So here with the auth, I'm gonna import it. So that we're gonna take a document. So here we're gonna add a top level collection. I'm gonna call it users, but you can name it however you like. And we need to add the user UID from this observable. Make sure that you're using backtick so we can use the string interpolation. So basically this function is gonna use the auth state, get whoever is logged in at the moment, and then we're gonna pipe that user out. And with that user, we're gonna find the collections in our database with the user UID. So in our database, we're gonna have a users collection, and then we're gonna use the user UID as a document key. So this observable is either gonna return that document or null. Now, if you reload our page, we're gonna get an empty object, and that's because we don't have any users in here. Before we were getting this object out. Here in our app.ts, we're getting this error because we are setting this data. Now is no longer Firebase user, is only our own user. So we need to import it from our interfaces, and that error should go away. So as you see, we can just change our data provider functions, and we barely need to do anything in our components. So that's why it's good to keep your data layer separated from your components. Now, another thing you can do is to add a type over here of user. So now it returns observable of user here. If you keep it without, it will return an observable of any. And as I mentioned, the more typings you use, the better it will be for you to code. You're gonna avoid some errors, and you're also gonna have code completion from your editor. Now we should change this Firebase user in the other place we added. So here we are doing the app menu. Back in the app menu, we had here as well Firebase user. So let's just import our own user. Now the error is gone. So we need to change it everywhere where you call the user. I think was in last one was home. So import. Right, I think that's all about it from the errors. I have my server running and I don't get any errors there, so should be good to go. All right, in the next lesson, we're gonna create this object here. We're gonna use cloud functions and we're gonna generate behind the scenes. Whenever a user create an account for the first time, we're gonna use a cloud function that will generate, we'll copy this data and add it to our database.